Hello and thanks for joining me on another episode of Zulf Talks. Today we've got a special episode. There will be a guest with me which is going to help us during our journey. So as you know, with the podcast we do cover work-life balance as well as business life. That does mean there's loads of little tips and tricks that can help us, and today I'll be focusing on 5 rules of a successful workplace and team management. They link nicely if you're making your own company. At some point, you will want this in place to make sure everything flows nicely. As soon as you've got a workplace and team members, it needs to be nice and easy for everybody and comfortable. Luckily, I do have a guest with me today as well, a skilled educator who has an extensive background in workforce and talent development. Over the past 5 years, he has written over 75 articles on various topics of relevance throughout his career. He's director of Roman 3 and operations, and he is Kobe Munneke.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for appearing today. It's been amazing. We've set this up a little bit in advance just to make sure that we can have a nice conversation, just to explain to our listeners how this is a very important area. So if you're able to give us a little bit of background, I know I introduced you there, but maybe from your point of view, how these key areas we're looking at today for successful workplace and team, something you would think of, and then we can start breaking down to the actual points of today's episode, the 5 points we're going to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So whether you are an entrepreneur starting your journey towards becoming a big company, or you're a team leader who's trying to build their career, it's really important to understand the role that organizational culture has into operational success. So whether that is realizing that the main assets in a company are the people that it employs, that people are not always seen as assets and resources. They're often seen as expenses and liabilities. And that fundamental underlying assumption, when we look at kind of the way that we operate our businesses, can actually be very telling about how successful we're going to be managing people and how important people are to the long-term success of our company. If we treat people well, they will become something that will be the lifeblood of our goals and our dreams when we're on business. But they can also be the biggest headache that we have if we're not viewing them in the proper light and seeing the value that people bring to companies.
Definitely. I'm glad you mentioned those points there. That nicely covers the people that will be listening today. So a number of our listeners will be thinking about these questions, and how you break that down is very nicely digestible and helps to get the point across. So in terms of the points we're looking at today are the 5, I'll call them rules. And for those listening, I'm doing a little inverted commas because it's easily adaptable. We can look at this in different ways. If you're listening today on Apple Podcasts, please do have a look at the other platforms we are available on. And if you want to see us today, we are on Spotify with video as well as the YouTube channel. So the first point we're looking at here is paying attention to the office design environment and how that plays a key role. How do you feel about that, Kobe?
So the way that our offices structure has a lot to do with the way that people work both productively and work inclusively. So one of the things that when it comes to the way that we structure our businesses, whether that's the operational hierarchy and the format and how many people report to how many people, or if we're talking structure from a more cultural environment, like the atmosphere, the morale sense, all of that really is, when it's not human-centric and it's now focused on the everyday people that are the ones doing the work day to day, then that really can have a negative impact. So one of the most important elements to any workplace is the concept of inclusion. Now, inclusion is often thought of as just a diversity initiative or something that is kind of just for people with disabilities or people that come from diverse backgrounds. But inclusion is about everybody. And everybody needs to feel like they belong. And to involve in a workplace where you don't feel connected, you feel 1,000, miles away from the person that's sitting right next to you, or you feel like, you're just a cog in the machine, that impacts the motivation you bring to work. That impacts the desire to give more than the bare minimum. And a lot of the issues that we hear about with things like, quiet quitting and all this other these other kind of terms du jour, a lot of it has to do with just realizing that people will bring their best when they're treated with respect, with trust, with encouragement, and with inspiration. And if those things don't exist, then it's constantly an uphill battle just to get even the bare minimum out of people.
Definitely. And touching on that a little bit in terms of office design
Mhm.
and design environment, do you have any examples of maybe where you've experienced that it wasn't the best and how a change can be put in place? So, for example, if we're listening, someone's listening today, what would they say is not a great design environment? Like, what's adverse effect to the wider goal?
Well, I think if you look at it from a where people are located piece, sometimes you can have collaborative spaces where it's designed to encourage people to, there's no walls, or there's or there are cubicles, or there's offices kind of centering on a central location. And I've been involved in lots of different organizations and consulted with many, many different companies, and I kind of find it a bit humorous when these companies invest like hundreds of thousands sometimes to make these really productive collaborative like office design spaces, but then they don't create an environment or culture that encourages people to work together, or to have the psychological safety to speak up and actually share ideas. It's almost like, here's a collaborative space to just do as you're told. And that disconnect is both putting, good money after bad, and it almost just makes like the hypocrisy of this disconnect so overt that it even, that it undercuts any possible, progressive idea the company may have down the road, because that kind of lingers over them.
Yes. So, in addition to that, touching on that, if there's a wider company which has got the bigger budgets and they're setting up the offices,
Mhm.
that's something to think about. Normally, they would hire some type of designer or office engineer or business analyst who actually looks at what should work well. If we're looking at it on the opposite side, so maybe a smaller new designer or a new company, and they've got maybe 5 or 6 people, they're using a small office, just making sure that their office environment is designed to make it easy, nice to work. If you've got 4 or 5 people, ideally having the right amount of desk space for them, having the right chairs, the posture, having a bit of training around if you're in an office working 8 hours a day, taking regular breaks, your eyes, your eyesight, all these little things are worth thinking about. So I'm glad you covered it from the wider point of view, because you have got a good amount of experience from that. But I think from the smaller side of things, if you've got a 5 to 10 workforce and you're maybe working from a house, or you've got a smaller warehouse, then these are still things that can apply to you. So definitely think about these points as being adaptable in different environments. So maybe looking at the other point here, you mentioned a bit about this already, encouraging a work-life balance. So you've got your staff, just making sure that you're not entirely focusing on them work, 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 work.
Right.
There needs to be some life balance there. How do you normally figure this out or speak to clients in making sure that they factor this in? Because sometimes big companies are about the money and they want to make sure everybody's working for the most amount of time possible.
Right. So one of the biggest things that a company can do, that actually, I'm going to answer this question almost from two sides.
Okay.
So when you talk about a lot of the work-life balance component to people, working from home and those kinds of things like that, you're talking about like what's referred to as like desk work, or like, or knowledge work. So we have the operational ability to have the like work-life balance, as far as working from home, like, the remote setups and, like, those types of things. Then there's a real opportunity to look at results-based outcomes. So one thing that we talk a lot about on our YouTube channel and on our podcast is the difference between prioritizing being productive versus prioritizing being busy. Because sometimes we say, okay, well, you can work from home, but I want you on your computer at these times or in these meetings. We're tracking your key, the typing use and all that kind of stuff. And that all that does is put restrictions on how to work. But the whole point of work-life balance is to provide the trust, autonomy, and flexibility that allows those knowledge workers to say, you know what, I do my best work in the morning, so I'm going to get up early and finish everything by noon, and then have the rest of the day off. And if you're focused on the results, finish this by this quality, by this time, on this budget, when and how you work is totally up to you. That is probably one of the most powerful ways to create real work-life balance, because you're leaning into the person's professional judgment, both themselves and the work, and saying, I trust you. I put all these checks and balances into place. Now you give me your best work and tell me how I can make sure that what you're giving me is your best. So then then the other side is looking at work-life balance from non-desk workers, which is about 70% of the jobs out there are considered non-desk. That's retail, that's production work, that's food service, all the kind of stuff where you're required to be at a certain location. That's a bit tougher, but autonomy and trust is still the key to that. Sometimes it's a matter of saying, prioritize, say things like cleaning schedules. If the workers know that they could do all this sort of stuff and be able to kind of have during the certain times to give them more downtime during the day, that can be beneficial. But one of the big things that I do is I talk to manufacturing companies. We do a lot of work with them. And I say, look at results-based work. If your team said we could complete our quota of, say, 10 tons of finished by the end of the day, that's our daily quota, what if we could do 10 tons instead of 8 hours and 6? Could we go home early? Or what if we could do 50 tons in 4 days instead of 5, so we have Fridays off? And a lot of times when managers and business owners hear that, they're like, well, you can go home early, but I'm not paying you for the full day. Or you can take the 4 day, or you can do it, or if you could do those in 4 days, then let's increase your quotas. And all that does is teach people, if you don't want to, do more work or make less money, do just enough to stay busy and get throughout the day. Because being busy is using as much time as you can with the tasks that you have, and being productive is doing as many tasks as you can with the time that you have. And knowing that difference can be the key to understanding how to create work-life balance.
Okay. You said some amazing points there, so it needs to sink in. I think when we're listening, we need to make sure that we're taking this in, because sometimes when really good points are mentioned, you'll take some in, but you'll forget a lot of them. So if we recap on some of what you just said there, if you're listening today, we're looking at 5 rules of a successful workplace and team. Within that, there's various little strategies, little tips you can do. Touching back on what you said there, Kobe. So looking at a workplace environment, say for example, someone is doing very well. You would encourage that person to do a lot better. So now that they've got experience, they can do that, like you mentioned in your example, they could do 3 hours worth of work in an hour because they've built up momentum. They know how to make things work correctly and get the job done. But then when a new person comes in, if you're getting them trained by that same person, you've just benefited from all that time saving, because he will treat and train them in the way that is the most efficient. So if you, like you mentioned, if you have a workforce or you've got people working for you, make the best of experienced staff. If they do something that takes 8 hours to do within 3 hours, treat them with dignity and respect and say, you know what, you've done really well. I appreciate you working a lot harder. If you want to go early, that's fine. Because in your mind, you know you've got the best out of them and they're a long-term employee. So you don't want to be making them, like you say, extend out their work and waste time.
Right.
Because then every new person that comes in is going to be taught that job in 8 hours, when in theory, the best from that person's ability is they could do it in 3. So now what will happen is, as those people slowly leave the workplace, your new workforce will be smarter, faster, and they will make up for any lost time. So you'll have 3 new people working a lot faster than one person wasting a few hours. So definitely some great points there. And also the wider arching work environment type arguments that happen, and a lot of managers micromanage, and there's different ways people do it. It depends how you've been brought up. Luckily, I've been quite lucky. I've been working in a financial environment. All my managers have been very like, you know what, he's doing it, let him get on with it because he's doing a good job. And I've been lucky. I've not had the experience of someone saying, why are you doing this in X amount of time? And I think it's important, if you're in this environment, as long as you're proving yourself and you're not just wasting time and being purposely causing problems, then you shouldn't have this problem. So that was point number 2. I think it's time we looked at point number 3, but before we do, we'll have a quick little mid intersection. You're listening to Zulf Talks, a podcast. You're listening to Zulf Talks, a podcast answering those questions we've all got in our minds, the day to day things we think about, and the challenges we face. Be sure to reach out on social media if you have any questions about the topics we're speaking about today, and let's continue with the show. Thank you for joining me back. We are back and we have got our amazing guest with us today. We're doing a number of points to basically help you make sure you're making the best from your existing self, your workplace environment, and your team. We have got a leading expert with us who's got a nice amount of experience in this. We've been really lucky to get some extra points of view from his experience. We've done 2 points already. We're going to be going on to number 3, where we're looking at more around a lot of people are working from home now. So it's important to see things like employees with well organized desks and workflows. So this is something that touches a bit on office design and environment, which is the first point, but we're going to lock down further into if you're a creative or you're doing homework in terms of you're selling online, maybe Etsy, you've got eBay shops, you've got YouTube channels where you're doing a lot of work. Majority of your time will be filming videos and editing. So thinking about how we can either as a company offer good tested solutions to help you be more comfortable. These are things like well-organized desks. You can have wider desks, which have electric desks to stand up, and you've got an extra bit of movement throughout the day. All these little benefits do help to make sure that you're in the right kind of mind and you're working to the best of your ability. So I won't cover this too deeply because I think we've got a show notes which will go into a bit of an article about getting the right type of desk and office chairs. So keep an eye out for that. And this does touch on our first point about office design. Providing you've got enough space, how you lay out that space is also very important. And I think another point here is the bigger you go, the bigger the company, the more people are involved in this type of process and steps. So if I look at my fourth point, I've tried something down here which is more about day-to-day living. So for example, a clean and tidy office environment, because I've been in a few office environments, different types of work, and it's not always at the forefront of people's mind because you may have a kitchen there, and these kind of things impact on people who bring lunch in. So do you have any information or tips about that there, Kobe?
So just can you reframe the question? I didn't quite
Yeah.
get.
So if you're looking at the office clean and tidy environment, how that impacts to have a good workforce and team.
Yeah. So I mean, the conditions that you work in undeniably impact the productivity and even the creativity of the work that you do. And one of those things where like when work from home and was almost became so normalized when COVID hit, one of the things that we would often remind people would be like to say sometimes it's a matter of if you treat your workspace like your workspace and not just the extension of your home or whatever like that, then that helps improve the mindset that you get into. So, because like we do, like everything we do in our work, improving productivity, efficiency, and efficiencies, a lot of it is psychological. And to realize that things like getting dressed for for work, even when you're working at home, it helps you recreate a better mindset. Having the clean space, having sometimes it's a matter of if you build a workspace in your home, build a workspace in your home. Don't use home furniture. If you can, build a professional desk and a professional setup, because part of it is when you can bring the work mindset to the work, you'll be surprised how much productivity happens. Another thing too is like the use of sound and music can have a massive impact on the way that we create it. Like people that listen to podcasts while they work in their offices, allows them to drown out the noise if they're in a noisy location. And sometimes different genres of music can help activate people's minds. There's a lot of great cognitive tips to help you set your mindset that allows you to get the most out of the space that you're in. But if you're in a chaotic space, if you're not in a space that allows you to feel like you're at work and you feel like you're putting, you're forcing yourself to be productive in a space that is not designed to put you in that right mindset, you're adding layers of difficulty to your day instead of just trying to lean into the fact that this is your work, this is your space, this is the mindset you want to be in. So craft that space so you can step into it when the time comes.
Definitely some great points there. So if we were to touch on this a little bit further, There's different types of work environments, and I like how you mentioned about setting up the sound, music, light, the mood. That makes a really big difference. If you have an office environment where you're going to be working, studying, writing, having the right ambience, maybe the light in the right correct temperature, having
Mhm.
something set up. There's been a big increase in lo-fi and slow music and motivational music, which you can play during hard tasks, which gives you a little bit of a boost. There's been a big raise on that in YouTube, I've noticed. So a lot of people are using those as a bit of
Mhm.
background music to give them an extra boost. So that touches into keeping yourself motivated while working. So it's a very good point. And also, light and the mood can help with that. In addition to that, have you seen the slightly bigger offices where they've started offering kitchens and food and chefs, and how that also gives the staff a motivation, so they actually have that part of their plan so they don't have to pay for it? Have you had any experiences of companies where that's been big? I know Google do that a lot, and the bigger companies do offer that.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of companies that, and part of we're seeing an increase in this with the whole pushing people back to the office and trying to kind of like end the remote work and work from home people have gotten used to. And I've seen it done very well. I've seen it done okay, and I've seen it done terribly. And kind of the difference is when you're trying to add value to the day of the people, trying to say, you know what, don't worry about about your the cost of your lunch, or trying to grab something at your desk. We're going to give you we're going to insist on the breaks, because that's very important that people take the mental breaks, and we're going to create a welcoming space for you to come and share with your coworkers and help build a sense of community. When that's the outcome, there's a lot of value that can happen from that. Now, when the food becomes the replacement for things like trying to create culture, like I know we micromanage a lot, so we're going to say we're sorry. So with pizza every Friday, those types of solutions are examples of doing it bad. It really is about what is the goal you're trying to achieve when you do this. Do you actually want to create community and a sense of belonging amongst people, and lean into the breaks and actually help them give you their best? Or are you trying to put band-aids on your other problems and hope they don't notice and think that a foosball table and pizza in the break room is going to magically make everyone happy?
Yes, yes. I can imagine. I've worked in a few places and I can sense in my head examples of those. If they don't treat the employees very well, oh yeah, we'll just give them a snooker table, foosball table, they'll keep them happy for a bit. But if you've got the core elements correct, you won't
Mm-hmm.
need those extra little cherries on the cake
Right.
just to make your staff happy. So I want to thank you, Kobe, for these amazing tips. You've shared some amazing ideas here. I want you to touch on some projects you're working on at the moment, because I know you're inspiring change, fostering innovation, and managing implementation, where the Roman three names come from. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that that ties in with your site and what you're offering. Can you talk to us a little bit about the projects you're working on at the moment yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So we do a lot of work with a lot of with in a lot of different aspects. So we had to do a whole company reswitch or rechange when COVID hit, like everybody else did. So a lot of the work that we've done, since 2020, has been trying to help businesses and industries reassess organizational culture and trying to create a performance efficiency through that. So we work with industry groups who want to do industry-wide initiatives to improve things like management training, because like 59% of managers receive no training, and then we wonder why we have micromanagement and all these other issues. So we provide training programs, we provide a lot of tools and measurements and resources. Like we are building supports and measurements to help businesses actually incrementally change the workplace culture. So we do a lot of stuff we do some work with individual businesses, but mostly we're trying to be thought leaders and create the tools others can use to improve their workplace. So we do that. We talk a lot about this stuff on our YouTube channel, Solutions Explained by Roman 3, and on our podcast, Diagnosing the Workplace. Because these are things that a lot of these ideas are not crazy or complicated. They're actually rather simple and elegant. Implementing them is very complicated. So we try and help get the ideas out there and explain the value of thinking differently about employees and about productivity. And then we also sell and help people with the tools to actually make that happen. So that's the majority of the work that we do at Roman 3.
Okay, so give us a real life example of that. So, say for example, a client comes to you and
Mm-hmm.
they're looking at improving their current workflow. What would a standard journey look like? Because I want to picture how, from start to finish, you kind of help to get people into this area.
Yeah, so largely, so when we work with a business of say 35, 50 people, often what we'll do is we'll do an organizational assessment. So we'll assess for job dissatisfaction and what we call the 7x3 rule, 7 factors of the workplace. Are they like, things like wages and job security and wellness programs? Are they competitive, sufficient, and equitable? And if they're not, that creates a lot of job dissatisfaction. And so we usually start there because that's kind of the foundation of a workplace that's hemorrhaging people. If everyone's unhappy because they're not making ends meet, they're not, they're burning out, or they're afraid of losing their job at any moment. So, and then we help them implement some solutions to help them resolve that. If that's not an issue, then we assess for psychological safety. Do they feel like they actually have, the ability to speak up? And if they don't, we help them institute policy changes and leadership supports to kind of help them create that environment where people can share what they need. Then usually from there, it's a matter of letting the employees who are experiencing the day-to-day helping, getting their voice to the management team, and that carries through to how can we improve inclusion, how can we create engagement. So a lot of the work that we do is about kind of helping them do the heavy lifting to reduce job dissatisfaction and create psychological safety. Then it's a matter of weaning ourselves off and helping the individual businesses work with their staff and listen to their staff to create inclusion and engagement. And then they become able to be, to strive for success and have that level of, ability to handle change, create innovations, or whatever. Because usually that power comes from this base that is our employees.
Okay, so now that makes sense. Working from a financial sector where it's a very big business, I can see where you would fit in there, because a lot of the times people have duties and those duties are tied to their role, so they can't really do what you're offering. So basically, you would come in to find a solution while they carry on doing what they're doing. You're looking at finding better ways to improve and make them even better. So that makes perfect sense. Okay, that was very nice. Is there anything else you'd like to add today? I think we've covered some of these points really well. Is there anything else you're working on that you'd like to mention to the listeners today?
No, I think that's a big part of it. But I think probably the last thing I'd like to say is just the idea of, in this world of talent, concerns, and attraction, if you are not creating these spaces that reduce job dissatisfaction, have psychological safety, provide inclusion and engagement, then you're creating people workforce where people don't want others to come and work with them. They don't want their friends and family to be subjected to, unsatisfactory conditions or to no psychological safety. So one of the things that we often say, how can I address the war for talent in my business, is to create the kind of environment that employees will refer their friends and family to you. And if you can do that, that's how you get a leg up on improving your recruitment and talent attraction and retention. And that simple idea is something that's going to be what's going to be critical when the world goes into recession in 2023.
Excellent. I think there's some very good points mentioned there.
You're listening
What
to
we'll
Zulf
do is
Talks, a
thank you
podcast
today for
answering
speaking
those
to us,
questions we've all got
Kobe,
in our
and it's been
minds,
amazing
the
chatting with you
day-to-day
today.
things we
I
think
want to
about and
redraw
the
your focus
challenges
to
we
5
face.
points you
Be
mentioned
sure to
initially in
reach
the video
out
and the
on
show notes.
social
You'll find
media
more
if you have any
information on Kobe,
questions about
and
the
I will see
topics
you
we're
on the
speaking
next
about
episode.
today. And let's continue with the show.